Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
Oh, wow. That went quiet for a moment.
You're listening to Peace Fund Radio with Ethan Dettenmaier and Adrian.
Was I live?
Right here on LA Talk Radio.
Yeah! We're
mic's
live.
still on.
My mic's... Well, I thought I filled the gap of the...
Hold on, let's turn Bev's mic on as well. Let's go full throttle with this.
Oh, let's go full... Let's actually open the entire studio up to
turn
the world
everyone's
today, like we did at Tulare over the weekend.
Hey, you were excellent up there, and I think the fans
wasn't
loved
excellent.
you. No, you were good. You did a broadcast. We did a broadcast.
We did a broadcast.
I stepped out of it, but you had a good panel up there and a good discussion going, and it went...
Yeah, actually,
really well.
it was actually kind of a good, and we're probably going to air that show either next week or the following week.
We should, because it was hilarious. And what better way to do a show than in a live setting like that, where you're supporting a good cause?
Yeah, and I actually think I want to continue doing something of that nature, where I can actually do a live broadcast like that. Who was the skull? That's what I want to know. We don't know who the name underneath the skull is.
That is hilarious, because if you know what Adrian's talking about, if you followed the convention Tulare Sci-Fi Con, then you know that one of the personalities he interviewed was the Red Skull from Captain America, who was played by Chris Cecil. Chris Cecil's been a volunteer with us at our annual Christmas event for homeless children almost every year for the last 3 years. He was Darth Maul.
I remember him being Darth Maul.
Yeah, he comes out as a...
comes out with one of the other...
Of the charitable causes. But it was hilarious because he was having like a real conversation as Red Skull.
Yeah,
it was actually
a
pretty good Red Skull. Yeah, there were some good costumes there. It was actually a pretty good Red Skull.
Yeah.
You have to make a certain character
adjustment?
I would say cosplay quota before we let you on a broadcast desk stage.
True. But it did have combat radio. It was a combat radio stage, which looked amazing. It was great.
Thank you.
Good setup.
Next time we should throw a Peace Fund panel. But you know what? You were in so demand. I wasn't even sure when we were going to start your broadcast because you were bombarded. You and Bev both. I mean, I know most people were lining up to actually meet Bev.
That's what they were there because they wanted to know the executive officer for the fight, and we have Bev Shihara in the studio instead of behind the pen.
Yes, one of our producers here who's responsible for making us sound so good on the facts and figures.
Yeah, I mean,
but you guys were great, very popular, and very gracious to come out. And as you can tell. I have a lot of confidence that the convention will ultimately be something, and it's for a good cause, as we all know. The door supports a charity. You were supporting the Peace Fund, as you should do up there. But the people are really nice, and they really take it to a sincere level when you come out to their community, because there's nothing going on in the Central Valley.
Yeah,
it's like American Graffiti.
Yeah, it's funny because I've never been up there. I've never been up that stretch of road before. It's the 99 where it splits off of the 5, and but it's a huge belt of walnuts and oranges and grapes and I didn't even realize
all kinds of fruit.
Yeah, all kinds of fruit.
And a lot of your a lot of our radio veterans were up there, but some of your Peace Fund radio veterans are up there. Rico Ross, who you did Highlander with, who you've known 20 years.
I've known him for a while. Yeah, he was having a good time. He actually joined us in the radio broadcast that we did.
He did, and he had quite a few things to say. He actually told me he was going back to it next year.
Did he?
Booked on something. Yeah, he had a good time.
The funny thing, I had 2 guys come in from San Francisco. From Sacramento, because they said you never come up there. And the funny thing is, I just got booked for Sacramento or just up that area.
Oh, good.
Yeah, for WizardCon. But it looks like they're announcing that pretty soon. I've got another 4 cons to do.
Well, I take advantage of your presence at conventions while you can, because your production slate is starting to fill up, and you're probably going to be out there less and less.
Yeah, that is true.
But it is nice that there was literally no barrier between you and the fans, and we know how some people get. You were very good. And I got to commend you on your set of photographs. I did stop by your table and compliment you on a particular one with you and the dog that I thought was quite charming. It was just a great vibe at the whole convention, but particularly at your table. You could tell people were genuinely excited to meet you, and for those of us in Radio Land who work with you every week, we're over it. But those fans,
he had to snuck that in, didn't he? We're over it after 3 years. I would imagine you would be. Yeah, that's good.
I don't want you to get too carried away with yourself, but they really did.
Oh, don't worry, I did that years ago.
Yes, it's over. It's over. And I thought the broadcast was really good. I thought it was a good setting, and I saw, if I'm not mistaken, because it was blown all over the internet. and all over social media, you were doing interviews with people like Xander Berkeley and
Yeah.
on the floor.
Yeah, I
with
did that
Peace Fund.
too. Yeah, I did. I wanted to find out, and this is what I'm going to continue doing probably when I go to different conventions, is I want to find out what celebrities' views are on some of the topics we're talking about on the radio show or that we're dealing with at the Peace Fund. And we'll be putting those topics or those commentaries on YouTube or on the Peace Fund YouTube site. And, I talked to them this week's shows, and this month's focus is all about what does the entertainment industry do to our kids? How does it focus in on our kids' lives? Is it detrimental? Is it good? Is it what are we looking at? Do we know? And the funny thing was, when we were doing the interview on stage, or the radio broadcast on stage, I said one thing to Rico. I was actually saying something to them, and one of the points I mentioned was us as adults, we look at things all the time. We kind of become desensitized to it. But for children, certain things are bigger than life. When a child, loses a brick of Lego, it's a major catastrophe.
Yes.
Well, to us, it's like, whatever. Same things when we watch TV, etc. It becomes whatever. And the fact is that sometimes we don't realize the subliminal messages that actually happen in radio and music and TV and animated products. So, and I made a couple of points, and Rico went, actually, I never really thought about it like that. And I think that's the point that we have to make here, is that sometimes we have to go, I didn't even think about it like that. And, one of the things we want to talk about today is animated movies, because animation today has become much larger. It's been around for many, 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 many years. And, obviously the message is always like, it's a cute little animation movie and it's a cute little this. But in reality, there are a lot of bad factors that actually happen in animation. Obviously, the largest animation company in the world is Disney. And even though Disney, the Disney magic shapes our kids, it's synonymous, Disney, with innocence and morality stories and fluffy little rodents singing songs of hope and joy. But it's an image that Disney's really done hard to perpetuate. But some of the stuff that they actually bring doesn't necessarily have that type of message. And when you're looking at cartoons, children's cartoons seem to have a safe option for movie night, but it turns out that they actually contain 2.5 times more violence than your or mine horror films.
That used to be the case for sure. Is it still the case now? I mean, I know like Warner Brothers and their try to kill coyotes and stuff was habitually violent.
Yeah.
We're going to drop anvils on people. We're going to dynamite people. But is that still the case now?
It's a recent study.
Really? Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah, and it says the parents of main characters are more than 5 times as likely to die in a children's cartoon as their own mom and dad's scary movie.
Wow.
Duh!
Just think about it.
You've got to think about that. You go, well, I didn't even thought about that, and that's what I want to bring. I want you to think about these things. Disney's huge. Disney it's a $42.5 billion per year profit making machine. And it's not limited to Disney films or theme parks. It owns 6 motion picture studios, ABC television network, 226 affiliated stations, multiple cable television networks, 227 radio stations, 4 music companies, 3 cruise lines, theatrical production companies, publishing houses, 15 magazine titles, and 5 video game development studios. It's a conglomerate. And therefore, I would mention that, Walt Disney acquired Marvel Entertainment in 2009 and then Lucasfilm in 2012. So their fingers are actually in so many things that we watch and put in front of our kids all the time. Now, let's just talk a little bit about kids' movies. And not necessarily just Disney, but, kids' movies in general. They're not, there's some of these classics are rife with unsettling moments. You've got, and you can't help think about it. Do you think it's a bit intense for certain films?
What are you talking about when you say?
Okay.
What moment? What moment are you thinking of?
Okay, let's talk about a couple of different ones. For instance, Disturbed Nights and Sleep. Simba's dad will come back in the end, and won't he, Mum? But he won't, because Simba dies in the movie and he's killed, and he's not going to come back. It's things such as I'll give you a thing. There's a doctor, James Kirkbride, professor of psychiatry at the University College London, he released a published study recently in the British Medical Journal that analysed 45 top-grossing animated children's films from 1937, which includes Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, up to 2013, which includes Frozen. And he concluded, rather than being innocuous and gentler alternatives to typical horror or drama films, children's animated films are in fact hotbeds of murder and mayhem and rife with death and destruction. The main characters in children's films were twice as likely to die as their counterparts in adult films, and almost 3 times as likely to be murdered. I mean, so are these the type of messages you want your kids to look at? Obviously, we're talking about young children here. I mean, when you get children a little older, they can actually discern the difference between animation and real life, or can they?
I'm not sure if I've never really thought of The Lion King in that sense. I'm not sure if it's because I'm desensitized to it, or if because
okay, here's some statistics. Bambi's mom gets shot by a hunter.
That's a terrible moment in animation.
Nemo's mother becomes fish bait for a barracuda for just 4 minutes into the film.
Yes.
And Tarzan's parents get mauled by a leopard 4 minutes into that film. And Simba's father, Mufasa, is thrown off a cliff and trampled by stampeding wild beasts in The Lion King.
One of the scariest moments in Disney animation history is when the rats make dinner for everyone in Ratatouille.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I didn't even include that.
Talk about a lack of sanitation.
This is what we're talking about here. I mean, again, animated films. You think, okay, this is general pop. You got to be really careful as to what is in that animated film before you show it to a kid, because a kid can have sleepless nights regarding certain moments in films that becomes, a scar on their brain in a sense, and gives them sort of nightmares. I mean, and think about it. Even the villains die pretty nasty deaths. I mean, you got Scar in he gets devoured by hyenas, and evil Clayton is hanged by a tangle of vines in Tarzan. The Little Mermaid, villainous Ursula. Remember that big giant frigging octopus? My kids watch it all the time. I mean, and my kids are frightened of her.
Is that an endorsement?
What are we talking about here?
Is that an endorsement of the Disney property that your kids watch it?
No, I'm actually I love the film. I think it's but the fact is, maybe at a very young age, those types of kids shouldn't watch it. My kids were frightened of Ursula. Were they? They were frightened. Were
you? What did you think of when you saw it the first time? Did you think that was
no? Because that's my point. As an adult, as an older person. In the sense of, if you're 14 years old, that's not going to scare you as much as a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old would. So do you let your kid listen to that type of watch that type of thing?
Would you say there's a market for a different form of animation, or a platform for animation that doesn't have that kind of element in it?
I think there is, and I think the fact is that you're making conscious decisions to put that stuff out there because it will make you money. That's a business decision that has to be really thought about, because I don't think really, when you're dealing with it in a room full of 10 executives, that you're thinking, oh, you know what, little Johnny back in Arkansas is not going to like this, or little Mary in Cleveland doesn't like. That's not on their brain. Their brain is, okay, how much money? What do we need to hit? What are the things we have to hit in this film? We have to hit to make sure that it hits the heartstrings, that the princesses always come back, and we'll talk about the princess syndrome in a minute. There's a lot of different factors in it that are not necessarily on the conscious level of executives at major animated companies, and I think that's problematic. I think there is a market for other types of movies. And I think you, as a parent, have to be very aware as to what the actual product is out there that you are showing your kids at home and in the movie theater. I mean, I want to take my kids to some movies, but then I go, oh, they're going to be frightened of that. Is it a bit too?
Yeah.
And
if you haven't seen it first, you're worried.
Yeah, you kind of worry. And I think the other thing is, don't you look at it as, I mean, I never really thought about it until I'm really looking at the subject matter, in a sense. I mean, I want to take my kids to see this animated movie. It's an animated movie. My wife says, well, no, would it frighten him? I go, no, he'll be fine. That's the general way most people kind of look at it.
So it must be
well,
fine.
It doesn't necessarily be just Disney. It can be any animated picture that basically it has a has a young, kind of feeling to the movie. I mean, Train Your Dragon is a great little movie.
I love that
You know, it's a great little movie. And there are other companies that are making good movies, although Disney and Pixar and all those basically have have cornered the market in it because they can make these mega blockbusters and then put enough P&A, print and advertising behind it so that they can actually sell it. So it's really kind of interesting to see what that is. And actually, I was just looking at a Twitter mention right now. It says, animated films taught me from a young age that death is important as dealing with loss, by Tyson Sana. So actually dealing with loss, that's an interesting thing. It teaches you. Does it teach you as a young age that death is important? Yes, it is important. And yes, it does. But how young and what other certain other factors in there that it teaches you? Does it scar you? I mean, does it? Did you let your kids watch animated pictures, Ethan?
I did.
Yeah. But did you ever think about it as a parent? There may be subject matter inside this that actually doesn't necessarily.
Or did you sit down and explain some of the negative?
Well, I didn't. I can't remember if I had a conversation about some of the content or not. I typically would. I didn't really. I usually watch things before she sees things, but so my judgment process, there is one in place. It's probably not the best, but I mean, I know she saw stuff when we were kids. It might have even been. I don't know if she saw Tarzan, but she saw Cars, and she saw like Toy Story. And, which I guess, to your point, features a character who's clearly delusional.
Well, the interesting thing
potentially mentally dangerous.
Yeah, there's the findings from 1999 found that movie violence led to anxiety, nightmares, and a greater aggression and violent behavior among children in real life. It's a simple thing. More recent findings have also linked on-screen violence with similar behavior off-screen. One study from 2013 even surveyed hundreds of psychologists and media experts and found a broad consensus that violent media leads to increased aggression in children. And Coleman, a co-researcher in the study, says he finds the death of villains particularly problematic because they may give kids the wrong impression. What kind of message are we sending them that the best way they can deal with a conflict is to kill off the people we're in conflict with? Think about that. And think about the violence you have in schools today. Does that send that message to them? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it does or it doesn't. Does it? Think about it before you actually answer that. He also says he's concerned about the psychological impact these deaths might have on older children, but he says traumatic cartoon moments can have a lasting effect on younger kids. So it really is, it's important to really kind of look at it. I never even think about it. I don't think about going to see an animated movie and think it's going to be detrimental to my kids' psyche. I mean, you just don't, because it's an animated movie. I watched Tom and Jerry when I was a kid. Tom and Jerry's all about beating up and smashing and falling, and the Roadrunner was always like dropping weights on top of people's heads and stuff. I mean, come on, these are things I watched normally as a kid.
Yeah, and I'm glad my daughter hates that show because it is a terrible show.
Well, but beep beep.
That was terrible too.
Yeah.
Beep, beep.
That was terrible too.
I mean, but that was basically what it was. It was all based on that. There is more to look at today. There's more certain things that have come to the fore now. That they are changing the way, and I think some. I mean, you take Frozen for instance. Frozen is a classic example of how it's become a little bit more of an adult animated movie because the characters in them, yes, they hit all the numbers. They hit the princess number, they hit the funny character number, they hit the bad guy number, but then they also have the main lead. Why is it such a success, that particular film? The main lead is a female that actually has her.
She's strong.
She's strong, but
she's
she also
not
has
one of the ones waiting for Prince Charming to come along and make everything okay.
It's a difference. So they've changed the format of that, and I mean, some of the things she did weren't good, which is actually a good thing. And as an adult, you can relate to that. So as an adult, you go and watch the movie because you go, oh, well, that was pretty good. I mean, I get that because it has adult subject matter or dealing with adult subject matter. So in a sense, there are certain ones that actually have a pretty good, reality in real life, but some don't. It's kind of interesting. I kind of find this interesting,
Well, what would you recommend?
Well, it's tough. I mean, because you're talking about how do you recommend it? I mean, what we're trying to do is highlight the issue here. Recommending it is, do you actually take a PG kids-rated animated movie and give it a different rating that may have content for younger children, younger than? I mean, is there a rating?
Don't we have that now though? G, but nobody uses G anymore.
Exactly. You got PG-13, which is it's good for kids under 13. Right? Isn't that the PG rating?
13 and above.
13 and above.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the rating for below 13? Shouldn't we have a rating that basically states, well, actually, this is not good for 5 or 6 year olds or 7 year olds. 10-year-olds could listen to it. 10 to 13-year-olds. Maybe there's something like that should actually put in animated movies today.
I think that's the G rating, but
who uses G rating? Who gets a
anymore.
G rating?
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't really, it's interesting because there are people talking on Twitter right now basically saying some movies are really violent, like Bambi or Dumbo. They couldn't watch them when they were growing up because they were too violent.
Yeah.
Well, Bambi's got that terrible moment that you, cited earlier that I think most of us hate, the hunting.
Yeah, I mean, but think about that.
I mean, a lot of Disney's violence occurs off screen. A lot of animated violence occurs off screen, so you don't tend to see it as violence, but it's still there. Little kids don't understand.
Well, no, but it's psychological. They don't understand it, but
they don't understand. And if the parents don't take the time to explain those moments, there's emotional repercussions.
Right. I think there's that type. I mean, there's so many other things in movies in general. I mean, we've got to talk about. God, I could go through this. Ugliness is immoral. Let's talk about ugliness. The primary antagonist in a lot of movies is portrayed as a physically unattractive. Encouraging children to associate this character trait with evil. I mean, think about it. What you're doing is go back to the bullying that we talked about weeks ago. Somebody that doesn't look the way you are or is different than the way you are, gets picked on. Therefore, when you deal with an animated movie where the villain is ugly or looks different than everybody else, they're the bad people. Mm-hmm. Think about it. I mean, female characters are particularly subject to this type of treatment. At least, I mean, look, think you've got the big three of Disney villain characteristics. But one is being fat. Ursula in the Little Mermaid, she was fat. Think about that. The old, ugly, hideous woman in the old woman in Snow White, or the ugly stepsisters in Cinderella. The bottom line is that you're basically preaching that attractiveness is synonymous with morality and happiness, and some things are portrayed as Disney villains, and even Disney villains, they're portrayed as insecure about their appearance, which causes them to take it out on younger, slimmer, better-looking characters. It's kind of, think about this. We've got to think about how that sits. Does that affect the way the kids grow up and treat their peers when they go to school? Does it affect them? Ethan's looking at me blankly now.
I'm thinking, I don't know. It might in some way.
I mean,
I'm actually trying to think if there was ever a good character that was heavy in a Disney.
Yeah, think about it.
I'm trying to figure
Are there any?
There must have been.
Out there. Do any of you know of a bad character? I mean, you even in what's the one, the big one that's Despicable Me. Despicable Me, the main character has a big hook nose. He's got this ugly. He's got these.
I didn't like that movie though. Not to upset half your audience.
It's okay. It doesn't matter whether you liked it or not. The point being is that you've got the main character, the main bad character, as having a physical disability of some form that doesn't fit into the stereotypical norm of slim, good-looking, etc. And reality is, think about it out there. Can some of you name any of? And if you can, go out there, look on the web right now, and see if there are any Disney characters or animated characters for films that have a villain that is a good-looking villain.
Well, Disney's done good-looking villains.
Okay, who?
The villain in Beauty and the Beast. They've done a lot of non-hideous villains. I mean, on the surface, if you want to talk aesthetics, they've been terrible people, of course. But I mean,
that's okay, because terrible people is basically, there are terrible people in the world, and that's basically teaching kids that But do you actually want to have a stereotypical bad-looking villain. I mean, in the majority.
Do you want to have a bad?
No, I'm just saying. Are there, and is that right? That's the. Think about it.
Well, I'm sure there are. Whether the morality of the question is that right? I mean, I don't know, honestly.
Let's talk about racial stereotypes, because that's another thing that actually happens in movies. Way back 1941. I mean, the difference is very different today. But I mean, originally, you've got The Crows in Dumbo, which was released in 1941. When racism against African Americans was more acceptable, was probably the most blatant example. The language and the attire of the birds is clearly intended to mock African Americans. So, I mean, back then, it was okay to do. I mean, I guess today,
here's what's interesting about that. You are correct. It does, I think, have that element to it. But if you remember the movie, they are responsible for really giving Dumbo his self-esteem and turning him into something. Remember, he can't fly until he meets them.
Right.
And they get him motivated. And then what's interesting, too, is speaking of birds in Disney movies, there's also the vultures at the end of the Jungle Book where they wanted to cast the Beatles and couldn't get them, but they got that other. Those guys are now vultures, kind of a negative connotation, if you will. I mean, they cast white people. White people. That's not. They cast Caucasian. You can tell.
You be politically correct, please, would you?
They cast British Caucasian actors to play those roles. So is it the what's on screen and how it's portrayed? I mean, obviously, I think you're not the first person to have a problem with the birds in Dumbo. I think I have seen people have a conflict with that before. But what would the solution there be, in your opinion? Like, what would you do if you have that script? And as a producer, as the producer you are, if you've got the script to Dumbo, and I hear they're remaking it with Tim Burton.
Oh, they really?
So, of course, it's going to have a bunch of creepy. It's going to only get worse. But if the script lands on your desk as the intrepid producer you are, you say, okay, this thing, when it gets to the birds, I see what they're doing and what they're supposed to do within the script, but how would you change it? And how would you recommend people change it to a positive?
There's a producer question for you, in a sense. And I think, there are so many other ways, I think, that you can look at something that has. Talk about the birds. They're teaching him something. They could be They could be Russian. They could be Spanish. They could be. Doesn't matter where they are. But when you're and again, however, saying that, I mean, you're looking at there are other characters that then you become stereotypical in a racial profiling sense, because then how do you do it? I mean, how do you actually if it's American. And it's a bad person, and it's somebody that's like the evil, guy you see down the street. Hi there, how you? Then maybe that's the way to. I don't know. I mean,
it's challenging, isn't it?
It is a challenge. It is a challenge. But you see, the thing is, that's that's what I was talking about earlier. When you're an executive in a room, you don't want to deal with that challenge because you've got 100 other challenges to actually produce the movie. So when you deal with something of that nature, you have to look at it and go, well, hold on a second. Let's think about this as well. Let's put this in our line items to discuss. And somebody will have a solution to it. There will be. I mean, you also have. There's another example. The Aristocrats. There's a Chinese cat that sings about fortune cookies, which actually, according to Bev's research here, was actually invented in America, which I never even knew that.
No, I've heard that too. Yes,
but it's almost. He sang it with an almost unintelligible Asian accent, and are you? Is that being stereotypical? Is that being detrimental to a culture?
I guess it's been so long since I've seen that. I would think it is, in a sense, yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of Asian Americans don't. They have an accent, but it's not unintelligible. I mean, they just went overboard with it.
Where does that movie take place? I don't even remember. Aristocats. Is it in America or in
I don't remember. It's long ago.
It was a long time ago.
The problem with Dumbo is that there's so many awful characters that are abusive in that whole movie by the time you get to the crows that I think it's like your salvation. I mean, there's so much animal abuse
but did you see this
treachery in that whole thing.
There was a documentary. I think it was a documentary that was talking about the making of that movie, and you were talking about getting the Beatles for that, but they couldn't do it. They actually took...
It's another British band.
It was a Jungle Book.
Yeah.
So it was a Jungle Book.
And it's another British band.
But they weren't able to. They actually had, Disney.
Louis Prima's in it too.
Louis Prima.
Yeah, the singer Louis Prima. He plays the King Louis character.
I mean,
and then
I love the Jungle Book. I mean,
I love it too.
The Jumbo, and
that's a great number. Actually, I think personally, there's some great songs in there. And then of course, you have like. You could go on and on about the character in now. So you could dedicate an entire month to the analytics of Disney characters.
Well, no, I mean, because they've been blasted many, many times about...
Probably rightfully so.
And yet, they still continue it to a degree. Is John Bealey there, by the way?
Let me see.
Yes, good morning, Adrian and Ethan and Bev. We are so happy to have you in the studio. We would all be in a lot of trouble if not for Bev.
Right.
Oh, shut up, John. So, John, you've been listening to us this morning. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, I kind of I liked what Tyson Saner said on Twitter that death in these Disney films is death is part of life, and it shows that as being part of these characters' journey. And I think ultimately it comes down to how comfortable do we make our children to feel like they can talk to us and ask us those questions if they need to. And I think that's ultimately the thing. Be aware of what your children are watching, and try to be aware of how it makes them feel. And it's if it opens the door to have some of those discussions, then I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing.
Well, I think it's okay to open the door to the discussion, but you can have a discussion with a 3-year-old on that subject matter. That what they're looking at it as is it's getting into their brain. So my point earlier is basically saying, well, should we as adults, we as parents, look at things and say, okay, is this going to be detrimental to my 3-year-old or my 5-year-old? Well,
it's always my favorite Disney movie was always Robin Hood, because it was the least emotionally devastating, I think, of that earlier batch of cartoons. I remember being shown Bambi in maybe first or second grade and just being totally traumatized by Bambi's mother being shot. I mean, that was terrible.
Yeah, you had a batch of cartoons like that in that decade, especially Alice in Wonderland, that was basically a drug trip with a bunch of rotten people, rotten characters. And I get what he's saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's ultimately look at just be aware of what your children are viewing and watching, and be there for them. If you deem that something is suitable for them, then be there and be available if they have questions.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was actually looking at some of the comments online here. I mean, talking about handsome characters, Brom Bones from Sleepy Hollow and Gaston from Beauty and the Beast were good-looking bad guys.
They have used that, and that's why I asked you the question. Aesthetically, they've done it, but that obviously is not the complete makeup of your character. Yeah. Those are obviously very ugly people internally.
Yes, absolutely. But that's the point, that they are, But the interesting thing is parental guidance. It should be, as a parent, parental guidance means watch the damn film first.
Yes.
As a parent, you're supposed to decide whether or not it's good for your own child to watch.
Well, and you were talking earlier about the rating system. The G rating for general audiences is practically non-existent these days. PG is for sort of that middle level, and then PG-13 is for suitable for kids who are 13 and above. And I think it's just just a matter of just be aware and be available for your kids.
Yeah, I agree. Oh dear, there's just so much to talk about. I mean, look, it's already look at the time. Oh my god, I've got like notes going like lengthy.
This conversation could go on for several weeks.
It could. Well, it's going to. We're going to continue this. We're going to continue this a little bit further as well, because I think we should do. Let's talk about some gender roles and stereotypes found in certain films. Many little girls wanted to grow up to be Belle or Cinderella, and little boys wanted to be Aladdin or Hercules. They're your idols, because they embody everything you want to be when you're young. But when you look back at these films, they might seem a little bit different, a little bit uncomfortable with what you see. Do you or not? Is it because some of the innuendos that were never to be missed as children, such as Princess Jasmine's clothes, are just a little too tight, or that we realise that the Beauty and the Beast are in an abusive relationship? I mean, these are subliminal things that we don't really look at when we're kids, but as we look at older, do we actually agree with those things that we would actually show our children from those types of things?
Are you asking me? Or
I'm asking in general. I mean, anybody in the studio, even John. I mean, that's Mainstream media puts images into our brains. I mean, it tells us basically what is appropriate for our gender type. You know, young girls are hounded with images of princesses. Princess, 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 princess. You know, but, you know, who tells them that? You're telling them basically the key to happiness is being fashionable, beautiful, and finding a prince to save you. It's not life. That's not what life is. It's far from it. So, and young men are taught that to be successful, you must be good-looking and muscular, and you know, so young men are sometimes even taught that to be successful means you have to be manipulative too. So these are traits that you're teaching youngsters as they grow up.
Don't usually the manipulative characters in Disney kind of meet an awful end, though?
Well, I don't know. Do they?
Inspiring characters. I mean, isn't that usually the villain mold? I don't think the hero role really.
Yeah, but think about it. When you've got a manipulative character, they are successful. You know, I mean, any big
manipulative characters in Disney that come to mind. Two you mentioned earlier. Those two drones in what is it, Cinderella, where she's got those two awful stepsisters, for example.
What were the two? Forellas?
Yeah, those two you wanted. I mean, I don't know what took her so long to I can't believe she didn't, knock those two ladies out earlier in the film. But
see, here you go, knock them out.
Knock them out. You see, there's violence
if
there.
Two stepsisters had it coming. It was
happening.
Those two ladies. I mean, come on. I think I've seen that recently. But anyway, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, but we're talking about, you're teaching kids from a young age a certain way to behave. That if you behave like this is what you're going to get. It's a simple, and the reason for it is a very simple reason. I mean, I hate to be Disney bashing this morning, but in a sense,
Money.
Too late.
Too late. Disney Princess franchise is a move that brought all princesses back into production, which all the princesses came back, which earns Disney upwards of $4 billion a year. So it's let's go make some money on it. But the repercussions that basically we're talking about here may be far-reaching, more far-reaching than you actually think.
Okay, let me ask you another producing question. Put together, if you could, if you have time, or maybe for next week, your ideal princess movie that you would, if somebody said, Adrian, I'm going to hire you to produce a princess movie, but that's what you've got to make. Here's your budget, go do it. Come back in 6 weeks with a rough draft of the script.
Actually, Frozen isn't bad.
That's what I was just about to say. I think
it's a turnaround.
Frozen. That's why I said earlier. Frozen is a turnaround because it shows that there are flaws and that not everything is peaches and cream. You're basically saying that you're talking about Elsa. Elsa in that movie is actually, she goes off.
She has magic. She doesn't know how to use it.
Doesn't know how to use it, and she does something bad. She does it. She does it by accident.
Not good.
So she's a princess, but
I think you should totally put some sketches together of what you want them to look like, what physical shape they're in, what their characteristics are.
Excuse me, do you know how long that takes? It doesn't take a week, Ethan. That's like an
my
entire
daughter will draw
thing.
the sketches for you. You just have to tell her what the design looks like, and and I think this would be a very Adrian Paul's princess movie.
Okay,
we could probably get it trending on Twitter.
It'd be
It'd
be very interesting. Actually,
honestly, it would probably solve a lot of problems. I mean, I think it'd be insightful.
Well, it could be the princess could be not the most attractive person in the room, and would have failings, but had great moral standings. I mean, that would be the thing that she has but it's not all about being.
You would like to see more of that. I think Disney has done some of that. You would like to see more of that.
But does she have to be a princess? I think.
But that's the point. Yeah, a princess. I guess what we're doing as adults, we're saying.
Why do you have to have princesses? What is the social?
Well, because we were talking about the money they make based on the princess format.
Yeah, they brought.
And too, a lot of those stories are based in actual fairy tales. So that's princesses are pretty prominent in those stories. So maybe that's why that motif kind of keeps coming back around.
Well, I mean, yeah, but again, John, let's think about this. I mean, when let's talk about there's Brave. I mean, when Brave came out, I mean,
that's actually a pretty good movie.
I love that movie. I love it. She was a Scot too. I loved that part of it. That was great. I loved it.
That was a good movie.
No, it was a great little movie. But when you're thinking about it, I mean, and she had failings too. She wasn't, all up. And I kind of think that's a trend that is kind of becoming. Animated movies now.
I think this dialogue that was out there, all these faults that people are finding, is maybe having an effect.
But when they did the 2D makeover on that. She had eyeliner. She had slimmer waist, tamer hair, and a slightly off the shoulder gown.
Brave did.
Yeah,
Brave,
when they put out the Disney collection, the Disney collection, she doesn't look anything like she did in the movie.
Yeah,
I haven't seen the movie, but I did see The Incredibles, and I would have to say that there's a hero that's a little bit overweight and a family that's a little odd, and
see, I like that. That to me is kind of fun.
and they had to kind of overcome some challenges. And then there's, a movie I thought that was actually pretty good was The Princess and the Frog, where she's not quite a princess; she's someone who works 3 jobs. And but maybe that falls into the typecasting you're talking about.
It does.
John, we've been talking so much. I mean, we need to get to the hero of the week this week. I need you to give us some updates and bring us our hero this week.
Well, speaking of Disney, it's a small world after all for Beverly Shihara, who, by the way, Bev's birthday is this Friday. Happy birthday, Bev.
Happy birthday.
Oh my God, she's 26 again.
John!
But when Bev was on her late way to Los Angeles, she got on the plane.
How dare you be nice and mention a birthday, John? How dare you?
Oh gosh, that means we're going to have to get a birthday present.
Carry on, John.
Princess frock, maybe. I don't know.
So anyway, Bev's on the plane to Los Angeles, and there's a couple sitting next to her while they're boarding. One of the flight attendants is trying to close the overhead board, and a bottle falls out. And Bev thinks, that looks like one of the fruit-infused bottles that was invented by our hero of the week, Carter Kostler, from the Alliance for Healthier Generations Youth Advisory Board, who called into our January 7th show to tell us about this bottle that he had invented. At the end of the flight, the parent or the couple sitting beside her is talking to the flight attendant about the bottle. They say, "Oh yeah, our son invented that." So Bev's like, "Wait, are you Carter's parents?" And they're like, "Yeah."
So
he's 3 rows back.
You met him.
Bev was able to meet Carter and talk to his family, and I thought that was just an amazing example of it being a small world. It's fantastic.
Yeah, he was on his way here. He was on his way here to an expo in Anaheim. Actually, they had a trade booth with the bottles. Yeah, it wasn't how I pictured him. It was funny. We were waiting for.
I know that trade show. My friends came in for that trade show. Actually,
okay, that's where he was.
Oh right, yeah. I heard about that.
It is a small world after all.
It is a small world. Sorry, John, go ahead.
Yes, we had on our June 4th show, 11-year-old Olivia Keith from Fishers, Indiana, called in to tell us about her Play It Safe program, in which she goes into schools and teaches kids about sports and playground safety, sharing lessons she learned in her own life after both of her parents suffered traumatic brain injuries. Olivia recently received the Prudential Spirit of Community Award for some of her recent activities, including a $1,000 grant to distribute bicycle helmets at a school health fair, and organizing a bowling team to participate in the Brain Injury Association of America's annual fundraiser, in which Olivia raised $70,000 for brain injury education. So Olivia, congratulations on the Prudential Spirit of Community Award, and you can find out all about Olivia's activities at oliviakeith.com. Also, big news this week for one of our classic heroes, Jack Andraka, who called into our March 6, 2013 show to tell us how he suffered rejections from 199 scientists before finally getting some lab space to invent a 4-cent paper test strip capable of early detection of pancreatic, ovarian, and lung cancers that's 400 times more effective and 27,000 times cheaper than the previous standard. Yesterday, Jack's brand new book was released. It's called Breakthrough. In addition to telling the story of how he created this incredible invention, Jack also talks about how he overcame bullying and depression and tells the amazing story of believing in yourself and overcoming the odds. And the book also has several do-it-yourself science experiments that your kids can try at home. So you always think, well, maybe one of these kids will try one of these experiments in this book and come up with something that can eventually cure something else. If you'd like to buy Jack's book, go to smile.amazon.com. Select the Peace Fund from Sherman Oaks, California as your charity of choice and purchase the book, and that way some of the proceeds will also come to help out the Peace Fund.
Actually, John, I just wanted to interrupt you there. I mean, we don't really do this, and I actually did it by mistake yesterday. When you go to Amazon and you buy something on Amazon, go to Amazon Smile, and that way the Peace Fund is actually one of the beneficiaries. They give a portion of the money that goes to the Peace Fund itself, and so you can. It's the same price as you would pay anything else, but you'd actually give a donation to the Peace Fund with your purchase.
And if you make your Amazon bookmark the smile.amazon.com, you will never forget, because it is sometimes it's easy to forget, but just go in there and do that bookmark. And very quickly we will get to our brand new hero of the week. This is a pretty incredible story. He's Elijah Evans, 17 years old, from Louisiana. Going to go back in time 15 years ago. Elijah is 2 years old, and he does something that his mother decides requires punishment. She doesn't scold him. She doesn't spank him. She holds him down in a bathtub filled with scalding water, causing third-degree burns over 43% of his body. The burns are so severe that Elijah loses all of the toes on his right foot, and the toes on his left foot are literally melted together.
Oh, my gosh.
He is removed from his mother's home and placed in the care of his grandmother, who neglects to provide proper care for his wounds. So then he is removed from his grandmother's home, placed into foster care, where he remains for 3 more years until one of his nurses, a woman named Lenore Harding, adopts Elijah and gives him the safe, stable, and happy home that he still enjoys today. But even though his own story had a happy ending, Elijah could never stop thinking about what he could do to remind other foster children that they mattered. As a child, he used to fantasize about going to a Christmas party. So when he was 12 years old, he began to speak at local schools and churches about his experiences. He recruited volunteers, organized fundraisers, and worked hand in hand with the Department of Children and Family Services to hold his first annual Christmas of Hope party for foster kids, and he's done it every year since. He also organizes an annual back-to-school party called Ohana, which is Hawaiian for extended family, to make sure these kids feel belonged and welcomed for the new school year. He's had so much success that he and his mother were able to found their own 501c3 charity called NUFA, which stands for No Use for Abuse. You can find them at facebook.com/No Use for Abuse. And their upcoming projects include a scholarship program, parenting classes, empowerment seminars for abuse survivors, and other fundraisers that help foster children and abused children get the equipment and opportunities they need to participate in extracurricular activities. Carter has an incredible quote: "I'm trying to show the children that just because you're in foster care or waiting for adoption, it doesn't mean that you can't do what you want to do with your life. It doesn't mean that you can't go to Duke or Harvard or Yale or UCLA. It's just a bump in the road. Go over the bump. Take the right path, not the wrong one." 15 years after the unspeakable abuse that sent him on his spectacular path to reminding all kids that they matter, Elijah is still undergoing medical treatment for the burns and other wounds that he suffered, and he'll undergo treatment for those wounds for the rest of his life. They were so severe. For taking that terrible time in his life and transforming it into opportunity and empowerment for foster children everywhere, Elijah Evans is our Peace Fund Radio Hero of the Week, with a special shout-out to his adoptive mother, Lenore Harding, for taking him out of a terrible situation and giving him the opportunities to help other children.
Wow. I mean, I can't imagine putting your child in a scalding water like that. I mean, that is just awful.
Yeah,
I mean, the screams that kid must have been doing. I mean, it's just, oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, like I said, he lost all of the they had to amputate all of the toes on one foot, and then the toes on the other foot literally just melted together.
But
it's like he describes his feet as kind of like a duck's foot, where it's just kind of a webbed together mess of where his toes used to be.
I mean, I can understand how, parents can go through that. And again, we're talking about having, in his case, he was able to turn it around. In a lot of other cases, I'm sure these children will be mentally scarred for the rest of their lives, and then turn around and do certain things that are not necessarily good deeds, should I put it, to other members of society or adults or other children. I mean, because a lot of the time we found, like for bullies are bullies because they are being bullied. So you want to, I mean, I just can't believe, I don't know, could you ever do that to your daughter, Ethan?
Oh, God, no, that's ridiculous.
It's just unbelievable.
I don't think most people could.
But that's 15 years ago. We're not talking about it about 50 years ago. We're talking about 15 years ago. It's unbelievable.
But again, he turned it around, and has dedicated his own life to making sure that it doesn't happen to other kids, and letting kids know that they belong and that they matter. And I think that's just an incredible story of strength and perseverance.
Yeah, brilliant.
Love it.
All right, John, thank you for bringing that this morning. We've got 1 minute left in this show. Again, is out of time, out of place, and but we've got some, I think, very thought-provoking questions today. We're going to continue this subject next week and the week after. We will be talking again about what the effect on media does to our children. If you have any comments about that, tweet us on our Facebook, on our Twitter page. Put comments on our Facebook page. You can talk to us about it, and we'll bring those questions up next week and the week after. Bev, thanks for joining us this week, and thanks for bringing us all this stuff.
Happy birthday, Bev.
Happy birthday, Bev. And John, thank you for doing this.
My honor as always.
Thank you. And in closing, everyone, a closing quote from Pam Leo. Let's raise children who won't have to recover from their childhoods. This is Adrian Paul and Ethan Dettenmaier. We'll see you again.
You're listening to Peace Fund Radio with Ethan Dettenmaier and Adrian Paul, right here on LA Talk Radio.